got to keep the white and the black separate.
I have a dream.
The 1960s was a vibrant and transformative decade filled with unforgettable moments and cultural shifts.
The people, the vibes, the music.
Swing low.
If you grew up during this time, you likely have vivid memories of iconic events and trends that defined the era.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. We have a liftoff.
So join us as we explore if you grew up in the 1960s, you remember these things.
We must get in our hearts that it is possible to be courageous and yet nonviolent.
Beatlemania. If you grew up in the 60s, you know Beatlemania was more infectious than the common cold. With their catchy tunes and mop-top hairstyles, John, Paul, George, and Ringo made girls scream louder than a fire alarm in a crowded theater. Their influence on music and culture was so huge, it's a wonder they didn't have their own planets.
Have just arrived and are about to set foot for the first time in our country.
The Beatles revolutionized music with hits like Hey Jude and Let It Be, making us all feel like rock stars, even if our singing voices could scare away stray cats. Their style set trends too, with everyone trying to look as cool as a cucumber in round glasses and skinny suits. And let's not forget the iconic Beatles haircuts, which had more fans than some entire bands. So if you remember the 1960s, you definitely remember Beatlemania, because honestly, how could you forget a craze that was bigger than your aunt's beehive hairdo? Hippie movement. Back in the 60s, you definitely remember the hippie movement, where peace, love, and patchouli oil were the holy trinity. Hippies were like human rainbows, with their tie-dye shirts and flower crowns. They believed in communal living, which basically meant sharing everything from food to flip-flops.
And when you're not willing to listen to what everyone has to say, you are denying yourself the ultimate truth.
Peace and love were their mantras, though trying to explain this to your parents often led to more confusion than a cat in a dog park. The hippies' favorite pastime? Protesting anything that moved. From civil rights to the Vietnam War, if there was a cause, they were there with a sign and a smile.
I do. I make love. I bring food to starving spades out there in Newark, and that's what I'm doing here tonight. And we're going to have a bee in there.
Their idea of a wild night out was a groovy jam session that lasted until the cows came home, or at least until the neighbors called the cops. The hippie lifestyle was so laid back, even their clocks probably ran on hippie time. Always late, but always cool.
The way the hippies want to live seems in the end to consist of childish postures. They claim they want to be left alone.
So if you remember the 60s, you can't forget the hippies. They made life a little groovier and a lot more colorful, like living inside a kaleidoscope. Woodstock. Woodstock was the ultimate you had to be there moment. Like the Super Bowl of music festivals, but with more mud and fewer rules.
You have seen the heavy groups, now you will see morning maniac music. Good morning, people!
Held in 1969, this iconic festival epitomized the spirit of the era, peace, love, and rock and roll. Over 400,000 people gathered on a farm, proving that yes, you can fit that many hippies into one muddy field.
And 5-mile hikes. Then the intense heat and sudden rain, the thirst and hunger from the shortage of water and food.
The lineup was legendary, featuring Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and The Who. It was like someone took your record collection and brought it to life, minus the skips. Despite the rain turning the site into a giant mud pit, everyone was too busy being groovy to care. People shared food, stories, and probably a bit more than just peace and love.
500,000 young people can get together and have 3 days of fun and music. Can I God bless you for it?
Woodstock wasn't just a music festival. It was a cultural earthquake that shook the establishment harder than your uncle's terrible dance moves. As Woodstock attendees reveled in peace, love, and legendary music, another monumental movement was reshaping the nation. How did the spirit of unity at Woodstock reflect the ongoing fight for equality led by the Civil Rights Movement? Civil Rights Movement. The civil rights movement was like the superhero saga of real life, with Martin Luther King Jr. as the ultimate Cape Crusader, minus the cape, but with plenty of powerful speeches. The fight for racial equality was front and center, making headlines faster than a celebrity scandal.
And the whites in Alabama had the power to tell me to get up because dare not sit while a white man is standing.
One of the most iconic events was the March on Washington in 1963. Imagine that over 200,000 people would gather at the National Mall, all united for justice and freedom. It was like the world's biggest group hug, but with more powerful speeches and less awkwardness. MLK's I Have a Dream speech was so moving that even the statues probably shed a tear.
Sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
The civil rights movement wasn't just about sit-ins and marches, though. It was about standing up, sitting down, and moving forward. It inspired countless acts of bravery, from Rosa Parks refusing to give up her bus seat to students integrating schools with more guts than a blockbuster action hero.
Blacks in Montgomery continue to boycott the buses, week after week, month after month.
Hence, if you remember the 1960s, you remember the civil rights movement, a time when ordinary people did extraordinary things to change the world. Space race. The space race was the biggest, coolest science fair ever, except the projects were rockets, and the judges were the whole world. This fierce competition between the USA and USSR to conquer space was more intense than your mom's casserole competition at the county fair.
We had a dead service module. We had a command module that had no power to it.
The grand finale came in 1969 with the Apollo 11 moon landing. Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon and declared it one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Which is astronaut speak for, we totally nailed it. Millions watched on TV, holding their breath like they were watching the final seconds of a tied Super Bowl game. The space race wasn't just about bragging rights, though. It led to amazing technological advances, like Tang, the drink astronauts supposedly loved, and Velcro, perfect for keeping your bell-bottoms tight. Plus, it made us all dream about living on the moon, though thankfully, we didn't have to deal with moon mortgages.
Okay, your go to start powering up the command module. Right on, we're starting now.
With the space race having everyone looking to the stars back on Earth, another movement was gaining momentum. What drove thousands to take the streets in passionate protest, making headlines alongside the Apollo 11 moon landing? Vietnam War protest. If you grew up in the 60s, Vietnam War protests were as common as tie-dye shirts and more passionate than your grandma's soap operas.
Demonstrators opposed to the Vietnam War assembled in the nation's capital for a mass protest.
The widespread opposition to the Vietnam War brought people together faster than a free concert by the Rolling Stones. Protesters gathered in huge numbers, holding signs with slogans that were wittier than your dad's worst puns.
That the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victors.
From college campuses to city streets, the chants of "Hell no, we won't go" echoed louder than a Jimi Hendrix guitar solo. It was a time when even your peace-loving Aunt Mildred was ready to march and make some noise. One of the most famous protests was the 1969 moratorium to end the war in Vietnam.
Permit the movement of refugees to the area of their choice.
Imagine, over 500,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C., united against the war, making it feel like the world's largest, most serious block party.
For the most part orderly, minor scuffles did occur between the demonstrators and hecklers.
People burned draft cards, symbolizing their refusal to participate, though it was probably the only thing burning that wasn't a hot dog on a stick. Psychedelic music. Psychedelic music was your soundtrack, and it was wilder than a roller coaster ride through a lava lamp. Bands like The Doors, Jefferson Airplane, and Jimi Hendrix didn't just play music, they created mind-bending soundscapes that made you feel like you were floating on a cloud made of marshmallows. The Doors' Jim Morrison was the rock god poet who could mesmerize a crowd with just a whisper, or a wild scream. Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit had lyrics so trippy that even Alice in Wonderland would get lost. And then there was Jimi Hendrix, whose guitar solos were so electrifying, it's a wonder he didn't cause permanent hair frizz for anyone standing too close. Psychedelic music wasn't just about tunes, it was an experience. Light shows at concerts turned venues into swirling galaxies of color, and lyrics took you on journeys deeper than your uncle's conspiracy theories. Flower power. Flower power wasn't just a slogan, it was a way of life, kind of like a love affair with Mother Nature. This symbol of passive resistance and nonviolent ideology was all about using flowers to spread peace and love rather than punches and politics.
People live gently on the planet without the sense that they have to exploit nature or make war upon nature and find basic security.
Imagine handing a flower to a soldier. Yep, that actually happened. It was like saying, make love, not war, with a daisy instead of a debate. Hippies were the ultimate flower enthusiast, probably the only folks who could make a garden look like a protest rally. Flower crowns, floral shirts, and peace signs made of petals were the fashion statements that even your grandma's wallpaper couldn't compete with. Flower power was more than just pretty blooms. It was a powerful message that you could fight with love and beauty. It was like turning a battlefield into a botanical garden.
Turn on, tune in, drop out.
If you remember the 60s, you remember flower power, a time when a simple daisy could speak louder than a megaphone, and love truly was in the air, or at least in your hair. Meanwhile, another social trend was taking root inside suburban homes. But how did Tupperware parties turn simple plastic containers into symbols of social gatherings and domestic ingenuity? Tupperware parties. Tupperware parties were the ultimate mix of socializing and sales pitches, where your mom turned into a sales ninja faster than you could say, lid on, lid off. These gatherings weren't just about snacks and gossip. They were full-on Tupperware showdowns. Imagine your living room transformed into a plastic wonderland, with containers stacked higher than your dad's bad jokes.
Do a Tupperware party and see all the new ways you can lock in.
The hostess, armed with a catalog and a smile, was more persuasive than a door-to-door vacuum salesman. And those Tupperware products? They were tougher than your math homework and more colorful than a rainbow after a paintball fight.
Meats keep meatier, beats keep beatier, chips keep chippier, dips keep dippier. Tupperware freshness, that's our promise.
Every mom became a Tupperware enthusiast, ready to seal freshness and friendship with a burp of the lid. And let's not forget the bonus prizes for the most orders.
Every hostess receives a valuable gift from Tupperware.
Because who wouldn't want a free container to store leftovers from last year's Thanksgiving? Soda fountains. Soda fountains were the original cool kids hangout spots, where the toughest decision was whether to go for a root beer float or a banana split. Tougher than choosing between Batman and Superman, I'll tell you that. These places were like the love child of a diner and an ice cream parlor, serving up fizzy drinks and creamy desserts faster than your grandma's knitting needles clicking together. And the ambiance, it was more retro than a disco ball at a roller rink. Imagine jukeboxes blasting tunes louder than your uncle's off-key singing while teenagers sipped sodas and flirted like they were in a 50s movie. The menu wasn't just about food. It was a journey through taste buds, with flavors more colorful than a hippie's tie-dye shirt. And let's not forget the soda jerks. No, not your annoying cousin, but the soda fountain heroes who mix drinks with the finesse of a master chef and the charisma of a movie star. Twist dance craze. Back in the 60s, you couldn't escape the twist dance craze. It was everywhere, like glitter at a disco party. Chubby Checker's hit song The Twist sparked a dance revolution that had more twists and turns than a soap opera plot. The twist was the go-to move at every sock hop and dance floor, with folks twisting their hips like they were trying to wring out a wet towel. Even your grandma probably busted out her best twist moves, proving that age is just a number when the beat drops. It was the dance craze that made everyone feel like they had a shot at being a dance sensation, even if their moves were as coordinated as a pack of penguins on a roller skate. And let's not forget the twist-themed parties, where the snacks twisted your taste buds and the decorations twisted your mind. Drive-in diners. Drive-in diners were the original drive-thru, where the food came to you faster than your dad's bad jokes. Places like A&W and Sonic were more than just eateries. They were the ultimate dining experience on wheels.
Sandy's isn't just a drive-in anymore.
Car hops, the real MVPs of the drive-in scene, zoomed around on roller skates, delivering burgers and shakes with more style than a Hollywood stunt double. They were like culinary ninjas, dodging parked cars and potholes to make sure your fries were hot and your soda was fizzy. And the ambiance? It was like stepping into a retro movie scene, with neon lights flashing and jukeboxes playing louder than your mom's vacuum cleaner. Every trip to a drive-in diner was a journey back in time, where the only thing faster than your order was the speed at which you devoured it. JFK's assassination. The JFK assassination was the ultimate plot twist. The shocking event in 1963 had more conspiracy theories than your grandma has knitting patterns.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
It was like the whole world held its breath as news spread faster than gossip at a family reunion. Suddenly, everyone became amateur detectives, trying to crack the case faster than a walnut at a squirrel convention. And let's not forget the endless debates about who did it and why. Seriously, it was like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube with your eyes closed. Was it the Russians, the mob, or maybe aliens trying to get a souvenir from Earth?
When I got there, I found that nobody knew too much about where he was hit, but they knew that the president was shot in the head.
The JFK assassination wasn't just a tragedy, it was a turning point in history, leaving a scar on the nation's psyche. So if you remember the 1960s, you remember where you were when you heard the news. A moment frozen in time. The nation grappled with the shock and mystery of JFK's assassination, leaving everyone yearning for answers. Another event was about to shake America to its core. What legendary performance would soon capture the hearts of millions and redefine the cultural landscape of the 60s? The Beatles on The Ed Sullivan Show. The Beatles on The Ed Sullivan Show was like a meteor crashing into your living room, but with more screaming fans than a rock concert in a volcano. Their 1964 performance marked their American debut and had more impact than a meteor shower of jelly beans. Imagine four lads from Liverpool with hair longer than your grocery list singing and swaying like they were about to launch in orbit. The screams from the audience were so loud that they probably drowned out the commercials for Miracle Mops and instant coffee. The Beatles didn't just perform, they conquered America faster than you can say Yellow Submarine. And Ed Sullivan? Well, he looked happier than a kid in a candy store, probably because he knew he had just witnessed history in the making.
The world's most exciting group, Capitol Recording stars the Beatles.
So if you remember the 1960s, you remember the Beatles on The Ed Sullivan Show. This moment rocked the nation harder than your grandma's rocking chair and left an imprint on music history deeper than Paul McCartney's dimples. Miniskirts. Miniskirts were like a revolution in fabric, shorter than your attention span during a history class. This daring fashion trend, popularized by designers like Mary Quant, had hemlines higher than your grandma's expectations.
The whole basis of fashion is that women want to be looked at, and this is what the young people want, and it's working.
Wearing a miniskirt wasn't just about fashion, it was a statement that said, I'm here to have fun and show off my killer dance moves, not adhere to outdated dress codes. These skirts were so short, they made hot pants look like winter wear. You needed nerves of steel and legs of rubber to pull them off, but once you did, you were unstoppable. Well, unless you forgot to wear shorts underneath, then you were just one gust of wind away from a wardrobe malfunction.
Take 15 girls all wearing miniskirts and invite them to break a world record held by a college group in America.
Miniskirts weren't just clothing, they were a cultural icon, symbolizing freedom, rebellion, and the undeniable power of thighs. So you remember miniskirts, a fashion trend that showed the world that sometimes less fabric means more fun and more stares. As miniskirts set the stage for a revolution in fashion and attitude, how did Barbie dolls become more than just toys, turning into miniature fashion empires that inspired countless dreams? Barbie dolls. Barbie dolls were more than just toys. They were like tiny fashion empires with more outfits in your grandma's closet. These iconic dolls became a cultural phenomenon faster than you could say Dream House.
Kelly's excited about her ballet recital. Ballet recital, Barbie and Kelly, pretty pink head to toe. So cute.
Barbie wasn't just a doll. She was a role model, teaching kids that you could be anything, from an astronaut to a fashion model, as long as you had the right outfit and attitude. And let's not forget Ken, Barbie's main squeeze, whose hair was so perfectly styled, it put your dad's comb-over to shame.
With Ken and Barbie, new deluxe quick curl Barbie, a fabulous gown and a beautiful shawl.
Every Barbie had a story, from dream weddings to high-fashion runway shows, and every accessory was like a ticket to Imagination Land. Barbie's pink convertible was the envy of every carpool, and her dream house had more rooms than a mansion and definitely more shoes. Surf culture. Surf culture was like catching the perfect wave, cool, refreshing, and guaranteed to make a splash. This beachy phenomenon had more style than your grandma's knitting patterns and more tunes than a jukebox on shuffle. Surfing wasn't just a sport, it was a lifestyle. A lifestyle filled with sun, sand, and wiping out more times than your dad's attempts at DIY projects. The Beach Boys were the kings of this wave, singing about surfing, sunshine, and those endless summer days that made every day feel like a beach party. Their music was like a surfboard for your ears, riding the rhythm like a pro surfer on a killer wave. And let's not forget the fashion. Board shorts, Hawaiian shirts, and flip-flops became the uniform of choice, making everyone feel like a beach bum, even if they lived miles from the ocean. Howdy Doody. If you grew up in the 60s, you probably remember Howdy Doody, a TV show that had more strings attached than a puppet's limbs. This children's program ended in 1960, leaving a generation of kids wondering what to do with their afternoons other than pretending their socks were talking.
Say, kids, what time is it?
Howdy Doody wasn't just a show, it was like the ultimate puppet party, with characters so colorful they made your grandma's quilt look dull. Howdy himself was the star of the show, with a smile bigger than your neighbor's inflatable Santa. The show had more jokes than a clown car, though some were as corny as your dad's sense of humor. But that's what made it so charming. Every episode was like a trip to a puppet wonderland, where anything was possible and every problem could be solved with a little bit of imagination and a whole lot of strings.
My name is Hey. My name is Zeke. We could play this game all week.
Howdy Doody left kids searching for new ways to entertain themselves. Another force was on the rise. How did rock and roll, with its electrifying energy and rebellious spirit, captivate a generation and redefine the 60s? Rock and roll. In the 1960s, rock and roll was like a sonic earthquake, shaking up the world faster than your grandma's blender in a smoothie mode. Legendary artists like Elvis Presley, the Rolling Stones, and Bob Dylan weren't just musicians, they were the architects of a musical revolution.
Rock and roll is a river of music. Rock and roll music is an art form. Rock and roll is here to stay.
Elvis, with his gyrating hips and swoon-worthy voice, had more swooning fans than your aunt's famous lasagna, which has layers. The Rolling Stones were like a rock and roll hurricane, leaving a trail of smashed guitars and screaming fans in their wake. And Bob Dylan? Well, he had more protest songs than your uncle has opinions at Thanksgiving dinner.
She rock to the east, she rock to the west, but she's a gal that I love best.
Rock and roll wasn't just music. It was rebellion, freedom, and the soundtrack of a generation that refused to stay quiet. It was the sound of teenagers breaking free from the shackles of tradition and dancing like nobody was watching, except for maybe their parents, who were probably shaking their heads faster than a headbanger at a heavy metal concert. Tie-dye shirts. Tie-dye shirts were like the fashion equivalent of a psychedelic trip, colorful, wild, and guaranteed to make you feel groovy. This DIY fashion trend wasn't just about clothes, it was a statement that said, "I'm too cool for plain old white tees." Making tie-dye shirts was like being a mad scientist in a lab, except instead of potions, you had buckets of dye, and instead of explosions, you had explosions of color. The results were as unpredictable as your grandma's fruitcake recipe, but way more stylish. Wearing a tie-dye shirt was like wearing a rainbow, except with more peace signs and fewer leprechauns. It was the uniform of the counterculture, worn by rebels, hippies, and anyone who wanted to stick it to the fashion establishment.